Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. Now don't mind me, I'm just looking for one of life's most interesting creatures, the eastern gray squirrel, or the Sicarius carolinus. Come with me, and I'll show you how this little guy emerged to become life's most interesting creature. Now, before I begin, it's crucial to understand what a species is, because without it, the ideas that I will talk about will have little value. Now, a species is a group of living organisms consisting of similar individuals capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding. Now, this can be based on three concepts: the morphological, the biological, or the genetic species concept. Now, the eastern gray squirrel is part of the Eukarya domain, the Animalia kingdom, the Chordata phylum, Mammalia class, the Rodentia order, the Squirrel family, and lastly, the Squirrus genus. Now these all come together to form the name Squirrus carolinus. The eastern gray squirrel spends most of its life in hickory trees or oak trees, and in temperate forests, just like this one. It's most active earlier in the morning, like right now, and it does not hibernate, something that differs from other squirrels.
The eastern gray squirrel is an opportunist when it comes to finding food. It feeds on maple buds in the spring, fruits and apples in the summer, and of course, acorns and seeds in the fall. You only have to look for chewed up shells to find the trees that it lives in.
As a tree squirrel, it exhibits little aggressive behavior, and would rather stand and use a show of force than actually fight. Now they tend to stay in a home range of a few acres. However, these can overlap with other tree squirrels and can cause conflict. Now that we know the basics of the gray squirrel, we must now look at how it came to be. What makes it different than a tree squirrel? What has happened to allow the eastern gray squirrel to exist? Now, what I just mentioned is called speciation, the formation of new species through the process of evolution. Now, first we must go back, way back, 65 million years ago.
It was here when a 10-kilometer wide asteroid struck the Earth, wiping out the vast majority of the dinosaurs. Mass extinctions such as this have occurred frequently in Earth's history. Events such as global cooling, volcanic activity, or in this case, meteor impacts, are exceedingly important for evolution. When a mass extinction takes place, the tree of life is pruned back, allowing new niches to emerge, or for old ones to be opened.
Now, a niche describes the way an organism fits into an ecological community or an ecosystem.
The meteor at the end of the Cretaceous period led to the diversification of small mammals. They were small enough to survive the initial blast and needed very little food to survive afterwards.
Now, it's from here that the ancient ancestor of the gray squirrel emerged and allowed for the current organism to exist. This also showed that mammals with vertebrae would become the dominant organism to live on land.
The second idea to discuss is called adaptive radiation. Adaptive radiation is a process in which organisms diversify rapidly from an ancestral species into a multitude of new forms, particularly when a change in the environment makes new resources available or opens new environmental niches. This applies to the eastern gray squirrel as it came into existence due to a large change in the environment millions of years ago, well after the Cretaceous impact. Fossil records show the evolutionary history of the tree squirrel goes all the way back to the late Eocene epoch period. Now this period refers to the North America of 34 million years ago. A study from Duke University found that climate was a major influence for the spreading of the eastern gray squirrel across the globe. What this means is that the modifications of habitats and the creation of land bridges between continents influenced the diversification of the eastern gray squirrel.
During the 5 million years that followed, there appeared to be a major divergence in the 5 types of squirrels, with tree squirrels being one of them.
And evidently, this corresponds with the biggest climatic deterioration of the last 55 million years. Big things were happening environmentally. With these changes, passages from Eurasia to North America were created. This was due to extremely low sea levels, changes in the seafloor, and the creation of the Antarctic ice sheet. With the introduction of squirrels to the temperate forests of North America, only time was needed before they evolved to become the squirrels of today.
Moving closer towards current times, we must now look at the idea of biogeography. Biogeography is the study of organisms and ecosystems throughout time and within a geologic community.
Currently, the eastern gray squirrel is found throughout the eastern United States just west of the Mississippi River, and north into Canada. They've also been located in Italy, Scotland, England, and Ireland. Now remember, the gray squirrel favors temperate forests.
It is this environment that allowed for the creation of the gray squirrel's tail. The tail, as an appendage, is a defining character of the eastern gray squirrel, and it is due to this environment that allowed it to be created.
The tail can be used as a show of force, a blanket while cold, or a source of shade when it's hot. It's even from the tail where the word squirrel originates, skia ura, which is Greek for shadow tail. Living in the trees means the squirrel needs the appendage to function in its environment. As well, using a tall hardwood tree as a home means the tail is necessary for survival. The creation of this tail is best shown by comparing the gray squirrel to the chipmunk. Being mainly ground dwellers, chipmunks, as you can see, have no use for a large bushy tail, and thus have not evolved to have one. Chipmunks don't need a tail to hop from tree to tree, nor do they need it for balance or support, as they live on the ground. However, living in the canopies of temperate forests is the direct reason for the large tail of the gray squirrel. Squirrels with a larger tail were able to traverse the trees better, find more food, and survive. What this means is that it allowed them to pass on the long and bushy-tailed genes to their offspring.
Finally, we must end on the topic of variation and adaptation. Now, variation and adaptation is the most important idea when it comes to evolution, and this is because it affects every organism to have ever lived.
By definition, variations are the differences between individuals which may be structural, functional, or physiological. These differ from adaptations, which are structures or behavioral processes that help an organism survive or reproduce in a particular environment.
Variations are the results of accumulative changes that occur over time, and specifically within an organism.
Now, it's important to know that all adaptations are variations, but not all variations are adaptations. Additionally, some adaptations can cease to remain in adaptation and can be considered variations at another time.
Now, all of this is dependent on the environment. Variations and adaptations are what they are due to the environment, and especially due to changes in that environment.
One notable variation of the gray squirrel is its color. A typical eastern gray squirrel has grayish-brownish fur with white patches. As you can see, this works with the squirrel, allowing it to blend into the forest habitat. Now look at this squirrel. It has black fur. You might think that this is an entirely different species. It is instead, however, still an eastern gray squirrel. What this means is that the difference in color is a variation that exists within the Squirrus carolinensis species. A study has showed that this black variation has a higher probability to exist in the northern areas of the gray squirrel's range. This gene for the melanistic phase comes from an unknown northern mellitinous adaptation.
Whoa. Now hold on. I just said it was a variation. Why am I calling it an adaptation? Well, that's because the squirrels that have the black fur use it as a solar heater. And what this means is that they're able to retain heat longer than a typical gray squirrel. This aids in their ability to survive and thus the ability to reproduce.
The variation of fur color is simply a variation, but due to a change in the environment, a colder one, that variation is now an adaptation that the gray squirrel can use to benefit itself, or in this case, the black squirrel. That change can also be referred to as a selective pressure. So, to conclude, the four main points to understand are number 1, the mass extinction, number 2, adaptive radiation, number 3, biogeography, and lastly, adaptation and variation, arguably the most important point of this entire video.